Go.
Well, good morning. We are back. Ron and Romane, Reason for Reason. We've been away for a little while, but we're back. And we come back at a very sad time in our nation's history. Just the other day, there was a school shooting that claimed the lives of 19 school-age children and 2 teachers down in Uvalde, Texas. So I don't want to use the old, often repeated cliche, our thoughts and prayers. Actually, our hearts go out to those families that are burying their children. And not just in this country, but around the world. Our hearts go out to those who are grieving the loss of a family member due to senseless violence. So we come on the air today, and we're going to talk about gun violence in America. When will it end? And right now, the sad part is that our government offers the same cliched answers, but no real action. You know, gun violence in this country it's an epidemic. And we battled COVID, but we're not doing anything to address gun violence, and it's killing our children. So Romane and I are going to be discussing that today, and we have a guest with us, Renee. Can you hear us, Renee?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thanks for joining us, and we're going to, at some point, open up the phone line, because I think this is a topic and an issue that affects so many people across this country. You know, so many of us are dying needlessly to senseless acts of violence. I mean, Uvalde was just over a week ago, and now we're dealing with the loss of 4 people down in Oklahoma. You know, a man walked into a hospital or a clinic and opened fire. He was angry because the doctor was not adequately treating his pain. So we need to do something. We have to address this issue. So we're going to toss this over to Romane for a second.
Oh.
And you know something? I say that because, you know, you can kind of talk from a spiritual aspect. You know, I mean, people talk about the history, the time we're in, you know, in biblical terms, right? Some people say, well, this is the end of times or the end times, and that this was predicted, it was prophesied, you know, but it doesn't make it any less painful when 19 children are slaughtered. So what do you think?
I think that we are living in perilous times. I think that we all grieve for the families, but I don't think we really stop to think about how it trickles over and affects everybody. Even family outside of the nucleus, it affects. And, you know, my family experienced a loss from gun violence in October, my daughter-in-law's brother. And so I've had a chance to see the effects of it up close and personal, and how it affects, you know, the siblings, the parents, the grandparents, the extended family, my son, who was his brother-in-law, my other son, you know, it affects everybody. And so I think that we have to, at some point, collectively sit and strategize about how we as a nation need to combat the gun violence. Is the answer to limit our ability to access firearms? Is it that we're not screening people properly? You know, what is it?
You know, I think it's a much deeper problem. You know, guns in and of themselves are not going to hurt you. It's when they're in the hand of a deranged individual that it becomes a problem. And in America, we seem to be breeding deranged individuals. So that's why I asked about, you know, well, again, people say that, you know, this is the end times, right? And that we're in that period. I guess it's called the Great Tribulation that would occur before the return of the Messiah. You know, I don't know if I believe that story as it's preached to us or taught to us throughout the years. But I do know that there was something happening that is bringing that is causing these constant acts of violence in this country, and it only appears to happen in America. And I mean, we have to, you think in terms of America's history, this is a very violent country. This country was founded on violence. This country built its wealth on violence, and this country thrives on violence. You know, for the past maybe 20 years, probably the vast majority of these shootings or shooting events has been a lone gunman with an assault rifle or a high capacity firearm. Well, it wasn't until the NRA started these marketing campaigns that marketed assault weapons did we see this rise in the sale of things like AR-15s, AK-47s. And now they're out on the street. And, you know, for this case in Uvalde, I think this kid bought this gun maybe a day or so before this incident. In Oklahoma, I think he bought the gun the same day. You know, so do we change the way guns are being sold? Will that help? I don't know. I think that so much needs to change in terms of us as individuals, us as Americans, us as human beings on this planet, how we respond to one another, how we relate to one another. I think that's a big problem.
You're right. And I think it was a couple of weekends ago, my sons came up and, you know, I have a license to carry, right? So we decided I was going to go and buy a new gun. And so we went up to Dixon's Grand, and they were showcasing these assault weapons. And we watched a young kid come in, and he was standing there looking. And my youngest son, he actually approached him and said, you know, what do you do with that? And the kid was like, I don't know, but he left the store. So it left us kind of wondering, like, did he come in thinking about purchasing one of these assault rifles? And my son was right. What do you do with that?
You know what? Throughout the years, we have been, at least in this country, have been desensitized to violence. And if you think about it, our kids are exposed to much greater levels of violence than we ever were. You know, when I was a kid, when you were a kid, there was no such thing as these violent video games where you see blood spatter, where you see people with assault weapons, you know, randomly killing people, right? And this is a game. What kind of game is that? Who gives a child a game where you see random acts of murder? And you think that's something we should market to people in this country, to young people in this country? You know, we have a problem already, and we have a problem on so many different levels. You know, when we were growing up, there was a different morality. There was a different concept to life. You know, a lot of us were raised with some sort of background or spiritual background or at least religious background that kind of prevented us from doing certain things, right? Now, we've removed any sort of spirituality from, we're trying to get it out of society, right? Nowadays, some places, if you pray, you can have a problem because people feel, well, you know, you're not inclusive of everyone in your prayer. And some people have no belief at all. So they feel as if, I don't know, is religion being forced upon them? So, you know, we've taken away, I guess, what were societal safeguards. And now pretty much anything goes. And until we address that, until we, the people in this country, start not asking our government, but demanding action from our government. You know, you want our votes. What the hell are you going to do to earn them? Our children are dying, are being slaughtered in schools. We're not talking about, America is not actively in a war with another country, with a foreign adversary. These kids are being slaughtered in classrooms, by other Americans. And we have our government who comes on and tells us, well, our thoughts and prayers are with you. Thoughts and prayers, you said that in Columbine. You said that in Sandy Hook. You said it in, what was it, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in Miami, and now you're saying it again. Nobody cares about your thoughts and prayers. We need action. And, you know, for me and Renee, we have children in school. My daughter's in high school. So when these things happen, immediately you think of your children. How would you react if you got the news that there was an active shooter at your child's school? Renee, what do you think? How would you handle something like that?
To be honest with you, I think I would have responded the same way as the other parents did the other day. They went to the school. And I know you and I had this conversation yesterday because my daughter's not taking it serious. She's like, well, I don't think it's going to happen in my school. Well, it can happen. Other parents probably said it couldn't happen at their school too. Every day I see her walk in the door, my fear starts at that point. And they have, they have cops around the school, but to me, it's not enough because there's different entrances to the school. I don't even know what to do. I'm literally afraid every single day when I take her.
You know, one aspect of this incident in Texas that we haven't yet talked about is the police response.
Yeah.
And, you know, from the media reports, the police sat outside. They didn't enter the building. You know, I mean, there's conflicting reports. Some say that, well, it seemed as if the incident sort of shifted from an active shooter to a barricaded suspect. Well, for the first officers to arrive, they had to have heard the shots, to have heard the shots. They had to have heard the screaming of these innocent children. What do you mean you're waiting outside for backup? There is not a police department across this nation, anywhere in this country, that teaches the proper response to an active shooter is to sit and wait for backup. Every department, even security forces, are taught once you have an active shooter, all bets are off. You go and you neutralize that threat. Period.
But doesn't that just go back to what we keep being forced to look at with the police and the fact that these people are taking these jobs as police officers and they really don't have the courage that's needed to be a police officer. So it's the fear that causes them to shoot too soon, right? It's the fear that causes them to shoot a grandmother because she has some mental health issues, right? And then it's the fear that causes them to delay in going in to what could have resulted in them saving some lives, right? It just goes back to fear. So as far as the police department goes, I just think that they're giving everybody these jobs. And, what the kids say, you're not built like that.
Right.
These people that they're giving these jobs to, they're just not built like that.
You know, I think that we expect certain actions from the police. We expect that when we see the police, we are safe. These children were dialing 911 from inside the school. Their hope was that the police would come and rescue them. And the police sat outside. Let's be realistic. We take young men and young women, 17, 18 years old, train them as soldiers, Marines, Navy personnel, Air Force personnel, and expect them to defend this nation, to overcome their fear. But then we make excuses for police officers. They have a tough job. Tell me, who in this country doesn't have a tough job? I don't know of anybody who does not have a tough job, right? Is the job of a police officer tougher than other occupations? Not necessarily. But in this case, when you are called upon to defend the lives of innocent children, you have to dig deep within yourself and find that courage. Because how do you explain this to the parents? And they're making attempts right now. I saw a press conference, at least a portion of it, from the director of public safety for the state of Texas. So he is basically doing what all departments do in the CYA. The fact of the matter is, no one wants to hear your rationale or your reasoning. All people know is that they're burying 19 babies and 2 teachers who their only crime was they went to school to learn, and the teachers went to teach. So enough of the thoughts and prayers, enough of the cliches, enough of what we're looking at it, we're talking about it. In 2000, I want to say 8, when the economy was on the verge of collapse because Wall Street was making risky investments called derivatives, and they almost sank the U.S. economy. It took Congress about a day to allocate billions of dollars to greedy companies that caused this recession. 20-some, almost 30 years later, after Columbine, we're still talking about hearts, thoughts and prayers, and how we can find ways to address this issue. 30 years later, it didn't take you 30 years to give money to these greedy companies. And you didn't even know, for the most part, where the money went. I think it was he was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke. He was asked by a member of Congress, where's that money going? These are taxpayer dollars. Where's this money going? And his answer was, I don't have to tell you. So if you can find the time and the energy and the will to address Wall Street, why aren't we doing the same thing for America's children? Somebody needs to explain that to me. And, I know that President Biden and his wife went down there. That's not going to bring back these children. And even after they were down there, we still had this incident in Tulsa. I looked it up the other day. Since 2022, there have been 27 school shootings. And this is just June.
And I'll tell you something. I believe, my oldest son was in the classroom for 10 years teaching. And when this had happened in the past, and he was still in the classroom, he still shares the viewpoint, but he thinks that teachers should be allowed to carry a firearm in the classroom. And I kind of agree with him. I kind of feel like, we don't know, that might have saved the life too, because where the police officers were too much of a coward to go into the building, maybe a teacher could have defended those kids. Maybe it wouldn't have resulted in 19 children and 2 teachers. And I take that thing with the teachers, the kids, of course, but even the teachers, I take that personally, because that could have been my son.
The only problem with that is, if you have an active shooter in the school and there's a teacher who's armed, once the police enter, they know one thing for certain, that there's an active shooter somewhere within the school building. Once they encounter this teacher holding a gun, what do you think the result's going to be?
A dead teacher?
Well, it could be a dead teacher, but are we going for the guy with the handgun, or are we going for the guy with the assault rifle?
Understand, your adrenaline is pumping.
Well,
You know that somebody in this building has a gun. You know that somebody in this building is actively shooting children. And when you come around that corner and you see someone holding a gun, your adrenaline's pumping, you're focused on this individual. I don't think anybody's going to say, police, don't move. I think the result is going to be a dead teacher. And, what's behind, I guess, the marketing of assault weapons and high-capacity handguns is the NRA. They're pretty much directing legislation in this country as it relates to gun control. In fact, the truth is there really is no control, right? Here in our state of Pennsylvania, we can go right now and buy a gun, an assault weapon, and leave the store in 15 minutes,
I know.
right? So there really is no gun control. In fact, nowadays you can buy a ghost gun that you cannot register because there's no serial number. People, you can go home, go on your computer, and order a printer, right? And you can make a gun in your house that is never registered anywhere. So there's really no control, and that's how the NRA wants it, because they're in the business of selling firearms. So whether they're selling it to the military, whether they're sending it over to Ukraine, or whether they're sending it to the Bloods and Crips, it doesn't matter to them.
But we have to come up with something, because if the teachers can't have a gun and we don't have armed officers in the school building, but yet you want to mandate that we send our children into these buildings, because if you don't send your kids, you're breaking the law.
Right.
If you don't send your kids.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to, parents have to stand up and say, okay, well, we're either going to come up with a strategy or we're not going to send our kids.
I think in terms of, yes, parents, but everybody needs to be concerned. Because yes, we're talking about an incident that happened in a school, but in Tulsa, Oklahoma, it was in a hospital. In Buffalo, and I went up to Buffalo after this incident, it was in a supermarket. A few weeks before that, it was in a church in California. So everybody in this country needs to be concerned, because it's happening almost anywhere. There are home invasions, right? You're not safe at home, in your place of worship, in your car. There was a guy in South Carolina the other day randomly firing at cars. Killed a 10-year-old boy who was on vacation with his dad, riding through rural South Carolina, figuring, well, we're safe. Bullet comes through the car, strikes his kid in the head. So, it can happen any place at any time. So we all need to be concerned.
But here's the social worker.
Mm-hmm.
We have to first address the most vulnerable population who can't advocate for themselves. That's our children. So let's start with the kids. And then I don't know if anybody's noticed this, but I noticed it the other day. I mentioned it to my son. Every time something like this happens, there's another one that follows it immediately.
Absolutely.
Because someone goes and mimics what just happened. The same way we saw that young man in the store looking at these assault rifles.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows what that kid might have been thinking about that he was in there. A 20 some odd year old kid. He's in Dick's on a Saturday afternoon looking at assault rifles. Like, why?
Well, something? I think it's important that we stop marketing these assault rifles to these young people. I think it is really important, right, that we begin to look at this situation in terms of not so much in terms of economic gain, but the fact that, we're killing our own people. We're killing our future.
Mm-hmm.
And until we begin to think of people not as commodities, but as human beings, we're always going to have this problem. And it's a multi-level problem. There's so many facets to this problem. In terms of this young man in Uvalde, Texas, what kind of home life did he have?
Right.
So, we have to address what's going on at home, right? In terms of education in this country, what are we teaching our children nowadays? Right now there's this ongoing debate. Nobody wants to have, what is it? Not Black Lives Matter, but this curriculum that deals with Black history in their classroom, right? Critical race theory. That's what term I'm searching for. Nobody wants that. But why not? Because it is not what you've been taught your whole life. It is not part of, or what was the basis for white supremacy, right? This is the other side of that coin, and nobody wants to discuss that. So we want to keep things out of the classroom. So somebody put something on Facebook. You know, people want to prevent you from reading certain books. They want to ban certain books, but they're not banning assault rifles.
Mm-hmm.
So something is wrong with us fundamentally. You know, and for this young man, it is said, at least the one I think in Buffalo, I think he was mutilating small animals.
Mm.
So nobody in the house knew what was going on. Nobody was aware that this young man had some serious mental issues. And, you know, let's be realistic. Mental health across this country is a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to talk about violence and people with mental illness possessing firearms, we need to address mental illness. And of course, we don't have the resources for that. That's what the government tells us. How many facilities are there around here to address with mental health issues?
There are, you mean right here in Monroe County?
In this area?
There are a few. I'm contracted with one of them, but maybe 4.
Okay, so 4. So Renee, where you live in Jersey,
Mhm.
how many facilities are there, you know, readily available for people that have serious mental health issues to get the help they need?
Not many, and if they do have them, they're understaffed. But let me just go back to another point. I didn't want to interrupt with social media and parenting. Most of these shooters, when they look at their social media, have shown signs of this thing, of signs of something, right? And they were forewarned. But they're out there. But then on the other hand, you have the Mark Zuckerbergs and you have all the people that, that own the Googles and the social media. They're talking about privacy. So do you want privacy or or can they look at your social media? And then also for the parents, you have to stop being oblivious and thinking that it's not little Jimmy, it's not little Sarah. No, because it is. Look at your kids' social media. Stop being friends and start parenting. It's right there. But also, like you say, like you're right, this is like a community thing. Because if you see someone's child or friend or whomever post things that are not quite right, then it's your responsibility to say something. When this kid was posting this stuff on social media, now people want to say, oh, we saw him post these questionable things, but no one said anything. It's too late.
Mm-hmm.
It really is too late. It does not take much to look at the social media. Stop turning a blind eye until after something happens. And then when they start interviewing the parents, they'll say, well, we didn't know. But you did know. You just didn't pay attention, or you didn't care, or you thought it was not going to be your kid. If I see something questionable on my daughter's social media, we're going to have a conversation. But I'm going to tell you, if I see something that breaks the law, I'm going to turn her in myself.
You know, as it relates to social media, most of these acts of violence, a lot of them, you know, case in point in Buffalo, this guy, he actually was live when he committed this massacre.
Yes.
I mean, it's insane that someone would commit an act of murder, massacre people, and then have it being beamed around the world live while you're doing this. There is no greater witness against yourself than for you to present the evidence that you killed these people. You did this yourself. But that shows you that he really wasn't concerned about the criminal justice system. You know, and it seems that only certain people in this country, and this is a whole, separate argument, but there's only certain people in this country that are really concerned about going to jail in the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
And then that's working class people, right? Rich people don't go to jail, and poor people have nothing to lose. So just middle class people, right, that the criminal justice system preys upon. But that's another argument. But as it relates to social media, I have a daughter around the same age as yours, right?
Mhm.
And if I see something on social media I think is objectionable, well, you ain't gonna be on social media.
No.
It's not
No.
gonna happen, right? Because anything you put on social media is permanent. You might erase it, but it's in the cloud somewhere that can be found later on. So we're not doing that. We're not playing that game. And a big problem is, as a parent, I'm sorry, but damn it, be a parent. If you have someone in your house, what do you mean you can't go in their room? Are you out of your mind? I pay the mortgage in this house.
Right.
So if
You're not violating privacy.
listen, I'm gonna violate the hell out of it in my house.
Yeah.
I'm coming in your room. If something is in it doesn't look right, it's getting out of this house. Are you gonna get out? Because that's the way I was raised.
Me too.
We did not disrespect our parents' home, and that's not going to happen under my roof either. What do you mean I can't come in? This is your space. No, it's not.
But Ron,
When you get a job and when you get an apartment or a house, that's your space. This is mine.
right. But remember yesterday we were talking, I said my parents took the door off because you don't have any privacy. No, this is my house. There's no privacy. But you're right. I think, and it's not our age. I want to say that these parents now have, they're afraid of the kids because, like yesterday we were having a conversation. It's almost like the government or the states can tell you how to discipline your child. But if the child goes and commits a crime, then they'll say you're a bad parent.
Right.
Well, which one is it? Are you going to allow me to discipline my child, or are you going to call me a bad parent? Yeah, I mean, come on.
You know something? It seems as if people in this country are trying to create chaos, right? And we are headed for a collision course with chaos. Because everything that we grew up understanding, right, has now gone out the window.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Basic things no longer apply. There's a poster in the college where I work, and there's about 12 different symbols that are symbols that represent the different sexual lifestyles. So when I grew up, there was male and female. Now there is transgender. There is asexual. There is
binary.
Binary. I don't even know what all these terms mean.
Me either. Sapiosexual.
Right. What all that means, I have no clue. But, that's the world that our kids are growing up in. And there's no sense of morality, no sense of community, no real love for one another. It's so difficult. If you love someone, it's so difficult to do them harm. But if you objectify them and they're just an object to you, then it's so easy to pull the trigger. You don't mean nothing to me. Yeah, we grew up in the same neighborhood. Your mama went to church with my mama, and our parents worked together, but you don't mean nothing to me.
I think that those are like polar opposites. I think the symbols in the school represent acceptance. I think gun violence, represents hate,
Mhm.
and represents people feeling like, because think about it, these people have an agenda when they go and they kill people.
Mhm.
So the guy who went into the store in Buffalo, he went into a black store. The day before, he conversed with one of the people at the store. The guy brought him coffee, all this stuff, right? And he asked the guy, "Are you going to be here tomorrow?" Did you see that? He
I
asked him
didn't see
that.
that.
"Are you going to be here tomorrow?" And he told him yes. Now, you have to ask yourself, was he asking, "Are you going to be here tomorrow because I'm coming to look for you and I'm going to kill you tomorrow after I drink your coffee and all that stuff?"
Right.
So I think that we have to be careful because acceptance means acceptance, and acceptance breeds love. We can't say we don't practice acceptance, but we want people to love one another. Those are complete opposites. They're going in two completely different directions.
Mm-hmm.
In order for us to love, we have to love with agape love, right? That's unconditional love, accepting one another for who we are, in spite of whatever we feel. I'm not gonna in a clinical world, we are careful not to practice transference, right?
Mhm.
When we deal with clients.
Mhm.
So whatever my belief system is, it doesn't matter what my belief system is. And if I can't separate the two when I'm with a client, then I need to get you to somebody else who can, right?
Mhm.
So, and we have to practice that in everything that we do. Because when we really walking in agape love, then we don't have the ability to start judging or hating people. But the biggest factor in this whole thing with these killing sprees is mental health. You mentioned that parents they're not looking at what's going on in their social medias. No, they're not. And if they were, they'd be able to identify some mental health issues.
Mhm.
If they were in the kids' rooms and knowing that, looking in the kids' rooms, you would be able to look around and tell that there might be some mental health issues.
Mhm.
If you're interacting and engaging your children, really engaging them. Because when you talk to your kids, and I know you can relate to this, you and Renee, when you talk to your kids, you don't talk to them generically. You talk to them, and I want to kind of know what's on your mind.
Mhm. Right.
I want to know what's on your mind. I want to know, I want to know your opinion. I want to know your likes, your dislikes. I raised my kids never being afraid to tell me when they disagreed with something that I said
Mhm.
or something that I did. You better tell me respectfully,
Mhm.
but you have a right to disagree. And I want to
Absolutely.
raise free thinkers, right? But it's all of those interactions that allow you to see when something's off with your
Mhm.
kids, right?
Right.
And then not sticking your head in the sand and saying, I'm gonna just hope and pray that it goes away,
Mhm.
or that it gets better. So I
Right.
think that's where we need to start. People can walk in the store. Now they did change a few things. Like I said, I went in the store to buy a gun. They now had something where I had to sit at a computer
Mhm.
um, and answer these questions.
It's just basically just an instant check.
That's it. Yeah, but
Mhm.
but guess what? It wasn't instant. I left the store. My stuff didn't come back to the next day. The
Mhm.
kids and I were laughing because the guy behind the counter looked like he was convinced that my stuff wasn't going to come back good.
Right. Right.
He's like, well, it's not back yet. It could take a few hours for it to come back from
Right.
state police. Ultimately, I spoke to them on the phone and they were like, oh, you can come up and pick up your gun.
Mhm.
But so they have implemented a few additional steps. However, the piece that needs to be implemented, we aren't even thinking about, which is that mental health piece.
Mhm.
Right.
You know-
You're absolutely right. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
So
that's okay. Jump in, Renee.
5 people I know, including a family member of mine, right, went to go buy ARs. They don't have a criminal background record. Squeaky clean. The reason why is because some were in the military, not saying that's because, but they were in the military or police. But they have a history of mental health. They just don't have a criminal background. But those are the ones, to me, that should not be allowed to buy guns. But So how do you, as a gun salesman or whomever, or how can you eliminate those type of people? Because those are the ones that, to me, are committing the crime. Because clearly, like I said, the ones that I know shouldn't have been even allowed in the store. Because not just them have a mental background, but when you look at the family, their immediate family has a history of mental illness.
But the thing is, if it's not documented, if it's not entered into the, say, NCIC system, right? NCIC system, then there's really no way of determining that when you're doing a background check.
Guess what you can do? Here's some place to start. I mean, this wouldn't be flawless, but this is some place to start, right? You could, the same way you sit at a computer and you answer these questions for state police, you could sit on a computer and have people have to do a psyche eval, right? And answer questions that would give them some idea, right? Because I don't care how crafty you are, you're gonna slip up on one or two of those questions.
But you know something, the reality is that, that would be a good suggestion. But even when there are glaring problems, right, people still aren't doing anything. Like we're talking about these parents. You knew your son was nuts. You knew something was wrong. And yet, in terms of this kid in Uvalde, Texas, he was 18 years old, right? Where do you get the money to buy the gun? If your family knows that there's something not right and they're not getting you help, then, by the time you go to get a gun, well, there's nothing in the system that would preclude you from buying a gun. Because mommy and daddy may have protected you, didn't turn you in, didn't take you to, say, a psychologist or psychiatrist, or even the school, psychologist to say, look, I think my son or my daughter needs some counseling. So that something is documented so that when you go to buy a gun, when they do the Insta check or your background check, something will pop that would say, wait, no, I don't think this is someone that needs to have control of a firearm.
But look at the Eric Feen one, the one that was in Pennsylvania, right?
Right.
Okay. My daughter's friend's mother is like 2 pictures over for him in high school yearbook. She said he was weird in high school and no one paid attention. They're in the same yearbook. And then the parents said they knew he was a great shooter because they always went deer and doe hunting. But this goes all the way back to high school. They're saying this guy was acting, showed signs of this. Because you're right. Like you said earlier, he was the one out there shooting the little birds and all the, little animals and things out there. But the thing about it is, I think also no one wants to say anything.
And that's the problem.
Yeah, no one wants to be the person to tell, because it's almost like if you tell on someone, you're a tattletale, and it's almost like a taboo to say anything. But like I said, when my family and the people I know were going to buy a gun, the first thing I said is, that ain't for you. You know you have mental illness. And then, like one of my cousins said, I want to protect. I want to protect my house. No, people need protection against you.
Right.
No. Well, you don't need protection. You don't need protection. They need you. You're way out there.
Well, you know something? When I talk about this whole chaos situation, you go to the average school, right? And there are children in there that you can identify that are problematic, right? But what power does the school have? Now, I used to be a school police officer here in this area of Monroe County, and I know students that were removed from the classroom because they made some threats on the computer. Well, as these threats became more alarming, they moved them from one school to, I guess it's a trouble school, within the district where they put all the troubled kids.
Yeah.
It's called the 600 school.
Well, that's what they call them in New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now here's the problem. You have all these troubled kids together, right? You're not addressing their issues. You're just getting them out of one warehouse and moving them to another, right? We're not addressing the fact that these kids may have violent tendencies. So
Right.
nobody wants to get the level of involvement, right? Who is involved? Who's going to take the next step? We think that anytime there's an incident, to call the police.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the police don't always need to be involved in every situation. Sometimes call the parents. And if you have a responsible parent, allow the parent to deal with this situation. Because the cops can't be there all the time. But if you're living under someone's roof, my roof, you're going to, my parents used to say it to me, oh, you're going to act right, you're going to fly right. Right? Period.
Yeah.
Because this is their home, and I have to live under their rules. If I don't want to do that, then I got to hit the streets. So for parents in this country, be parents. Stand up for your children in some situations, and others, look, you need to come get my son or my daughter because they need help. Right.
Right.
And when you see that the child needs help, advocate for your child.
Mm-hmm.
Move heaven and earth to get your child the help that they need.
Absolutely.
Right, but here we are, right? Like my cousin, right? My second cousin. She displayed mental illnesses as a child. Her mother took her to psychiatrists, took her to all types of therapists, but they kept turning her away, like just different people. And she even took her to the hospital. Now here this kid is an adult, and it's almost like in order for you to get your child help, you almost have to commit a crime. Like it has to be like, so you have to go through so much red tape. If I take my child to the police and say, look, she needs help, I take her to the hospital, they admit her, she's out in 2 days. I even called, like my cousin even called the judges. And like, where do you go? Because there's hardly any red tape. Now, if she was a kid, like a little kid, then yes, she would get the help. But what about all these where the parents are trying?
Well, in the state of Pennsylvania,
Mm-hmm.
an adolescent who is 16 or older can refuse psychotropic medication.
Yes, did.
And then comes the other piece where if a child is, or an adolescent is, let's just say an adolescent is 302, right, which is an emergency hospitalization. If they're put in a hospital,
Forcible.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
If they're put in a hospital, you can't hold them beyond a certain point unless they pose an imminent threat to themselves or others. The problem is that a lot of times people know how to answer that question.
Yeah.
So they could be having suicidal ideations, and you ask them, do you feel like you want to hurt yourself? Because they don't want to stay in the hospital, they say no.
Well, here's the other piece to that. So the 302, the police come out and bring you to a hospital. Okay. By Pennsylvania state law, because I worked at St. Luke's, once that person is brought in on a 302, you have to advise them that they can sign paperwork to convert that 302 to a 201, which now becomes voluntary. So after 72 hours, you can go home.
Yes.
That's Pennsylvania law, which now this person you believe is such a threat that you had the police go out and forcibly remove them from their home. You bring them to a hospital, and within an hour, now that paperwork that says they're a danger goes out the window.
Yes.
And they sign another piece of paper that says, I'm voluntarily committing myself. So within 3 days, they can walk right back out. Are they any less dangerous?
No.
Think about this.
But the person who's 302 can do that same thing.
That's what I'm
All they
saying.
have to do is, not just sign and switch it to voluntary,
Mhm.
even if it's an involuntary hospitalization. After a certain number of days, you can't hold them again unless they pose an imminent threat.
Right.
And they're not going to tell you unless they really want help.
Right.
Some
And here's
people
the
really
thing.
want help.
Let's say you 302 somebody, right?
I had a few of them I like the 302.
But let's say you did, right? Okay. 3 days later, they're out. And now who they angry at?
Oh yeah, they're angry at me.
And because they changed the paperwork from 302 to 201, they can keep their weapons.
Oh yeah.
So this is the problem in America. Nobody wants to get involved. Nobody
Right.
wants to go the extra mile. And because of that, you have Uvalde, Texas. You have the supermarket in Buffalo. You have Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. You have Columbine, right? And you have so many others. I mean, let's be realistic. The first active shooter in this country at a school was in 1966. 56 years of carnage, and the government still does not have an answer. So we in this country, the American people, have to demand that our government stop listening to not just people with money, the money classes, corporate America, but demand they start listening to us and that they protect the lives of our children the way you protect the money on Wall Street. Let's be realistic. You walk on Wall Street, you act a fool, in 30 seconds, you gone. There'll be cops, Secret Service, and everybody else coming at you from every which way. You're not going to do that there. You can't get into some of these financial houses, but you can walk into a school.
But this is the country that we live in. We live in a capitalist society who has, this country is founded on thievery, murder, slander. So it's almost like we're expecting them to do something different with this.
Well,
we have to do it.
Exactly. You know, we have to demand it, right? And in Uvalde, Texas, you saw these parents showing up at this school. They were trying to get in the building, right? They didn't have any weapons, but they figured, if I can get my child out, if I can some way, if enough of us can overpower this guy, some of us may lose our lives, but we can save some of these children. These people willing to take matters into their own hands. And we have to do that, right? You know, like you said, you were going to buy a handgun. It's sad, but the reality is in this country, you have to be able to protect yourself. Because at any time you can encounter one of these psychopaths. And, you know, it could be in your supermarket. It could be driving in your car. It could be in a movie theater, almost anywhere. You know, and the sad part is that you get police who are going to sit outside, and you get a government that's completely tone deaf, when 19 children and 2 teachers are killed. So, you know, this is a conversation that can go on and on. You know, this is something that needs to be at the top of the legislative agenda, and it needs to be in everybody's, whether you are a parent, a grandparent, whether you have no children at all. This needs to be in the forefront of your thoughts. And, you know, not just because it has happened, because it can happen again, and you need to be prepared. What am I going to do if somebody comes in the supermarket? How do I get out? Where are the exits, right? So, you know, this is an ongoing conversation, and we're going to have to revisit this.
Absolutely. You know, let me just say one thing. I was talking to a guidance counselor, and he's recently retired. He said by the time that child is in 3rd grade, they can tell whether or not they're going to possibly go to jail or prison. By the time 3rd grade,
right?
You know, and now I don't know, but this is also what he said. He said they look out for, and to me, it's almost like he was kind of alluding. They look at Black kids that way. But how many Black kids have been shooting up these schools?
Right.
right?
That's what I was getting ready to say, Renee. And then I know we being prompted.
That's it.
Right.
But what I wanted to just say is we have to even be careful with that, because some of those evaluations that they use, those evaluations are designed to identify our children
Yes.
as having the potential of ending up in prison and stuff like that. So I don't agree with those evaluations that they use. I think that, again, African American people, that we have to come up with some different ways to deal with our children in school. We need to make sure that the guidance counselors represent us when we look at them. It has to be more people who look like us. And the gun issues, we have to just make up our minds that we're going to advocate and not drop the ball, which is what we do in this country with everything.
Right.
We start out full steam ahead, and then we lose steam, and then we drop the ball. So we just have to stay mindful.
You're absolutely right. And with that, we're going to have to bring this conversation to a close. There's just so much more that needs to be said. This needs to be an ongoing conversation. This needs to be happening in schools across this country. When you go to open school night, you need to talk about it. When you go to the school board meeting, you need to talk about it. You need to know what measures are being taken to protect your children. And that goes no matter where you live, no matter what state, no matter what country. You need to know that someone is looking out for your children.
Right.
So Renee, we thank you for having us, coming on with us. I know it was a bit of a struggle for you this morning, right?
I told you my edge is gone.
But we thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you.
And we're gonna again revisit this, and I know next week Romane has something special planned. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So next week we are going to have the ladies come and take over the studio. Ron will be here, of course. We got to have some kind of masculine energy here. But we're gonna have the ladies come in and take over the studio. And Renee, I think Renee's gonna come up as well. And we are gonna talk about whether or not we've been raised to be independent or whether we've been raised to be a wife. And I made sure that the people are invited into the studio, that we had somebody from like every decade, so that we can see the differences in the millennials and the Gen Zs versus, us baby boomers and stuff like that. And so we're just going to take a look at it and see whether Kevin Samuels was really on to something. Because I think we're going to be really surprised. Maybe he wasn't all bad.
Right.
Maybe some of the things he said he might have been truthful about. So next week will be fun.
Okay. Well, I look forward to that, and I hope you folks will come and join us next Saturday, 9 to 10, right here on Gynesis Radio. Have a good day, folks.
Thank you.
Yeah.